Everyone. I'm excited to be doing these game reviews. It's a shame because of scheduling we weren't able to do it live and at the same time, but I'm going to do my best to review these games, hopefully make some helpful points. And if you have some other questions about the game, feel free to email me or contact me, and hopefully I'll be able to answer those questions the next time. So for this game, it was a very exciting mid-game battle that we had right here in the lower left corner. So this was really the crucial part of the game. And I'll go back from the beginning after this. But basically we had this situation where white invaded here at c10. And white ended up with these sort of three groups that were separated, but black also had a lot of cutting points. And when black honeyed at the head of these four stones, white had to decide how to handle this situation. And white chose this clamp, which unfortunately turned out to be a mistake because after black calmly connected here, white's groups were totally separated, and black's groups were now very thick and connected, and the game became very difficult for white after this point. So we'll go back from the beginning and figure out just sort of how we got here and what white could have done with this situation. So we started with a pretty normal opening. Black played this sort of wide shamari, which has become very popular post AlphaGo. If you guys aren't sure of how to deal with it, there's no reason to panic or whatever. White's approach here is totally fine. It would also be fine, I think, to just split like this, or for white to enclose his own corner, or approach, or anything like that. So white approached here, black pincered, and white jumped in the corner. I think this is all fine. But after this, white played a bit of an unusual move, which is this hane here. So the normal joseki that we see is with white pushing here, black extending. White usually plays this exchange, and it used to be that black would always connect here, but now we see that a lot of times black instead plays this extension, which is just sort of a more flexible move. And the idea is that if black, in the old-fashioned way, plays this way, then later in the game there can be a lot of aji for white to either jump out or descend, and just sort of create a little chaos for black in this area. But in the actual game, white instead haned here, which I think is still okay, it's just a little unusual. So if black is uncertain how to play, in the game black haned, which is fine, but black could have also considered this turn here. This is kind of the classic example of, if your opponent doesn't play the expected move, then sometimes you can play that move instead and get an advantage. Personally, I like this turn a lot. I think it's a pretty thick move and is really kind of shutting white in. So white will probably play this hanging connection. Black will make this exchange once and then play on top here. And so black ends up with this pretty thick wall, and white is really shut into the left side. So this looks pretty good for black to me. And you might be wondering why black plays this Atari here. It's a very good shape move, because if black instead only plays here, then white can make a very comfortable loose shape here and create a cutting point for black. So black really wants to be sure to first get in this sente exchange. So in the game, black chose to block from the other direction. This sequence is fine. Black haned here, which I think is okay. Black could also consider extending. I think probably both are fine. Hane, extend. So white tanuki'd here. If it were me, I would prefer to push here one more time. I know that sometimes it can be kind of painful to sort of push from behind, especially on the second line. But I think this push is pretty helpful, because if you don't push here, then later in the game, black can get this turn here at g2. The turn isn't sente for the life and death of this white group, so it's not a matter of life or death, but it's still a very big move, and it's kind of sort of this threat that's kind of hanging over white, because black can play this very thick move at any time, and so if white were to ever cut here, it's not really that big a deal, because black can always just make this sente exchange. Yeah, But okay, but this enclosure is still pretty big. Black chose to approach here, which is good. And then white played this kick. So the thinking on this kick has sort of changed post-AlphaGo. It's become more acceptable when it wasn't before. But I still personally don't recommend it, especially for players around your level. I would really think of this kick as sort of a special case move. The two cases being either if white really wants to make shape for his stones. Like, for example, let's say if there was already like some black stone around here, then maybe it would be more important, for white, if there's already a black stone around here, then it might be more important for white to try and make shape. So that's situation number one. Situation number two would be if white already had a stone, like, let's say, around here. You see this a lot in handicap games. And so in this situation, if white kicks like this, then black can't make a very big extension. These stones are very, very cramped. So it doesn't matter that we made black a little bit stronger because black can't use that strength. But in the game situation, without that stone, black is able to make this full extension here. So personally, I like this for black. And the other thing is white made this 2-point jump. The 1-point jump is the more sort of standard move here. And that's because it's just a little bit better for the corner. So afterwards, if black invades, white can, of course, allow black out this way, but white doesn't have to do that. White could also choose just to descend here and let black live in the corner in exchange for some thickness in the outside. So white will push to create cutting points, Hane here, so white has now Hane'd at both heads of these two stones, which is very powerful. And now the key move here is going to be this cut at R18. So black might be tempted to just take this stone, but then white can cut on the other side, which is double Atari, and capture these stones like this. So this is a very powerful turtleback shape for white, and black is stuck in the corner. So black will never play this way. Instead, black will just connect here and let white hold on to the corner like this, and maybe play this way. So now white has the corner, and there's still a big weakness here. So white can be pretty happy with this. But with the game move here, if, let's say, white were to later let black invade this way, then if white descends, black no longer has to play this peep and get cut off. Black can just push once and came up. And black can settle pretty easily here. Even if white tries to shut black in, black can create a lot of cutting points here. So this is going to be a little tough for white, I think. Okay, so then we have this sort of shoulder hit from underneath here. So it's funny, we actually see black do a similar thing later at M17 right here. And I actually don't recommend either of these moves, and you're going to see why in a moment, which is because you almost end up getting yourself Hane'd at the head of your two stones, just like this. And this is a pretty bad position to be in. So this shoulder hit is really a special case move, and I don't think there's a reason for it here. Instead, I would recommend just playing a big move somewhere else on the board. So for example, this approach here, or an invasion here, or something like that. So we sort of had our first fight of the game. So white chose to cut here, which I think is a good move. Black found a good combination. I think sometimes Q players especially can get a little uncertain of how to play in these situations where we have a crisscross crosscut, but both players handled this pretty well. So this Atari and extend is a good move, and then white played a good move, which is this calm extension here, and then black tanuki'd. But I think it's a little early for a tanuki. I would maybe want to push one more time to get a little bit more thickness for these stones, and then think about some way to nullify the thick white's influence down here. So this turn that I keep talking about is still an option, or if you're more focused on the corner, something like this for black maybe. to just sort of mess up this influence a bit. I think looks pretty good. But black played away, so white chose to play this thick move here. So that looks good to me. But then black played this move. So I was a little confused by this move, but I think that black maybe intended this as a ladder breaker for this p9 stone. But of course, there is no ladder, right? Because even if white just plays here, there's just going to be a net here. So this stone isn't really going to help with that. So instead, I would recommend one of the moves that I was mentioning for black before. But I think white maybe kind of got faked out here and played this extension here. So just like I was saying before, it's not necessary. So white should instead, I'd say, think about invading or closing off this corner or something like that. So black got a bit of a freebie here and then played this shoulder hit. So like I was saying before, I don't recommend this move. I would just jump in the corner. That move looks right to me. So we could either have this sequence that we talked about before, or if white chooses to play the other way, then black can break into the corner in sente. Using that sente maybe to play a move here or invade here or something like that. So I'd say this game is looking pretty good for black to me if black plays that way, I feel. But black played that way, and I think maybe black was afraid of getting hit on the head like this. But this descent down is actually a bit worse, I think. So it's just not a great sequence for black. And white played a good move here. I think a lot of players would be tempted just to descend here and kind of hold on to your territory. But white instead chose to turn on the head of black stones, and that looks good. But after this, I would play one more exchange like that. It's a free exchange. It's thickness towards the center. And this L15 stone actually would have helped a bit later, as we'll see. But instead, white chose to invade here. I think this invasion is good. Black played a good pincer. And then white played a kind of creative move here, which I think is good. You could always just jump. But I think this attachment here at d8 is a good way of using the aji of the white stone. So Hane, pull back. Then I think we have a bit of a mistake for black here. This move is just a bit slack. Black should at least just connect here, and then maybe white would Hane. But notice that for this cut, if white already has this exchange, then white can capture this stone in a ladder. So that's how this L15 stone would really help. But the strongest move for black would just be this extension here at e7. I bet that black was a bit worried about this cut here at c7, but there isn't really a problem. Black can calmly descend here, and there's nothing white can do. Black has 4 liberties, and white has 3 liberties. So extending here puts a lot more pressure on these white stones. So I don't know, maybe white would attach here, or just jump out, or something like that. But after this cut, I think this pulling out is a bit of the wrong idea for white. So these stones actually aren't really important. The idea is just to use the aji of this c6 stone to help our 3 stones here. So what if we just Hane like this? The Hane is sente, we can get that Hane, and then we can make a nice hanging connection here. So at this point, the game would actually look pretty good for white to me, because this invasion has very successfully broken up black's territory without making a weak group for white, and black is very over-concentrated here. And later, there might even be an invasion point here. So I think white could be pretty happy with this result. But this push is kind of creating too many weak groups for white. So black plays this extension, white extends down. This cut is okay, but kind of like I was talking about before, since black has this turn, it isn't too powerful, I think. Sorry. So black played here to protect his stones, which I guess is okay, but black could instead think about playing a move like this. This is just a bit more powerful because it threatens to capture this white stone, and still locks down these 3 stones here, so we might see some kind of sequence like this. if this were to happen. And I think this looks good for black because white's groups are still separated into two, and black doesn't really have any weak groups or weaknesses. So this gave white a bit of a chance here. I think white should push one more time, because if black tanukis, then white can just hane here, which is basically just captures these 3 stones, which is very strong. So black would have to play here, and then white could just jump out. And this seems like a bit of a better way to play. And this jump is threatening to pull out these white stones here, so black would have to lock these stones down, and then white can jump again. So instead, white pushed here, which is fine. Yeah, so this hane is a strong move. Black could keep things a little simpler, I think, by just extending here. This would just prevent some of the complications. But instead, black chose to hane, and so this is sort of the key point that I was talking about at the beginning of this review. So this clamp, unfortunately, just isn't going to work, because after black connects, there really isn't much of a continuation for white here. These 4 stones are dead, these 2 groups are separated, and black doesn't really have any problems. So instead, I think white actually should have just considered this cut here. This is more sort of the right direction of play. So black has a couple options. Black can either extend like that or extend like this. If black extends like this, then white gets to play this strong move to come out. And if black isn't careful and plays here, then white can actually capture these cutting stones. So this would be a disaster for black and really good for white. So black isn't going to let that happen. Instead, black is probably going to come out here to separate white stones. But then white can play this exchange that I was talking about before. And this move is going to be sente to capture these 2 black stones. So black has to connect back, and then white can play a sort of thick move here on the outside. So I think at this point, this would have been the best result for white. So white does successfully kind of squeeze this black group here. White is very thick on the outside, and these these 3 white stones still have some aji. Even if black tries to capture them. After this push here, there's a weakness here, but also for that, I wanted to show that white can just turn here, and black can't really do this push and cut because there's a double Atari. So it's actually not so easy to lock these white stones down, and white can still mess with this bottom group a bit here. So I think this would probably be the best for white. If instead of descending here, black extends like this, I think that's probably not quite as good, because white can force here this push and then just capture like this. So actually, not even just not as good. I would say this would be a disaster if black were to play this way. So probably instead of this extension, black would have to come out, and then white would play here and capture these stones. So black actually should definitely just play this way, and we can have this sequence that I was mentioning before. So I think this would really be the way for white to go. After this clamp and connect, white kind of is running out of options. This extension is fine. So after this black move, white connected here, but it's just too heavy for these stones. Instead, I would want to just jump out some way would probably be the best. Or like after that exchange, white could consider just jumping out. These 2 stones are just no longer that important. After this jump here, white's groups really are separated, and I think it's a little hard to continue. Instead of this jump, black could have considered the kosumi here to prevent this connection, right? I assume you guys are familiar with this sequence to connect underneath by sacrificing a stone. But after this, where is this? This kosumi, this connection underneath will no longer work. So that might have been a bit stronger for black. So actually at this point, if I were white, I would have just played this connect under. and maybe just try to scrounge around for some life there. After the wedge is a little unusual, I think black handled this well. White sort of had a last try here with this cut. And black kind of calmly just extended here, and white tried to get out, and so white actually played away because I think white saw that there was no way out here, and so unfortunately I think this is kind of game over for white here. So just to recap, I think the key moment of the game was this clamp here where white instead should have cut and started a fight this way. But this problem happened because white was a little too focused on this one stone here and pushed when it would have been better just to make a thick shape here. And I think black should have played a little bit more aggressively with this extension, and I think both players should have avoided these shoulder hits from underneath like I showed here. So I hope that was helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.